Alright everyone, so we're taking a look at Sony's new HDR-AS200 VR. This is their sort of updated model of last year's AS100V. It's got some improvements and stuff like that, but let's get into this. So we'll open this up. I'm going to take the remote out, and then we're going to just sort of zoom in here a little. So this is the VR model. You can actually get a version of this without the remote for about $300, or you can get it with the remote for $400. Now the remote retails by itself for $150, and the reason why it's so expensive is because not only is it a sort of a Wi-Fi transmitter that can connect up to 5 of these guys with a built-in color LCD screen, but it also is the GPS device. Now, if you want to use this guy, and if GPS data is important to you, you need to have this remote, because the GPS data is actually being recorded by this remote and then being sent to the camera, and then that information is used in Action Cam's Movie Maker to sort of display that data for you later. So we'll kind of pop this open in a little bit, but if you want to get the normal version, this is what it would look like without the remote. And yeah, so it says GPS, but again, you need the remote. So the Sony AS200 offers a steady shot similar to last year's model. It can do 120 frames a second at 720p. We can get a bit rate of 60 megabits a second out of this guy. It's splash proof, so if you're ever shoreside and stuff like that, you don't have to worry about it getting destroyed, because all the ports will be pretty much good to go. However, it's not really submersible without this case, so that's one thing to consider. And if you are going to be using this camera for diving, this is not the recommended lens for diving. This is more of added protection for if you're dirt biking or mountain biking and you want something that's a little more shot proof, or maybe protects the lens from sort of kicked up rocks and dust and stuff like that, because this bubble lens will actually give you kind of a blurry distortion. The flat lens, however, from last year's case will work fine on this guy. It's only the FDR X1000V that would need a new model lens, because that camera's a little bigger in body shape than this, so that front lens doesn't fit. So this year's case is very similar to last year's. The buttons feel pretty good. However, like pretty much everything with the body on the AS200 is identical to the AS100, with the exception of where some text is located. So we still have that record button in the back. When we push it, if we're taking still photos, it's going to sort of push it forward, which is kind of a bummer. But if you're recording video, it should be fine. And if you have the remote, and you can take all the photos and stuff like that, I would recommend from your wrist, sort of your wristwatch, let's call it. That way you don't get blurry images and stuff like that. So, and we can also lock it here, and this has a nice sort of snapping to it. That way, if we have this in our pocket or in our backpack, we don't accidentally record a bunch of footage we don't mean to. So we have our tripod mount right here on the back. It's sort of not centered, but works out, I guess. However, when we open this guy up, we have this little mounting screw on the bottom here. Now, when we put on this adapter, we can actually use this without the case to mount to a tripod with this adapter here, and that will actually make the tripod adapter centered, and it'll just sort of rest right there. Again, the screen is similar to last year's. We have this sort of watch-based LED screen, and a lot of the updates that were made to the options you can use in here for the X1000V are here in this watch as well. So we have loop, which is at the front, which I feel kind of weird. I've been very used to when I want to power out the camera, press previous ones, and then press the power to turn it off, but it's actually 2 away from it now. So if anybody from Sony's listening in a firmware update, I think loop should be further to the right, maybe in between interval and photo. But I want to power it off fast. And then we have play. If we have our HDMI out, or even our watch, we can actually play clips to the watch, so we can, you could share photos and stuff like that with people on the spot. So we'll go into setup here, and we have a lot more options this time around. So we have our video format, which is how we switch between XAVC, which is their pro mode, and it's called HD here, which is weird because it's changing names again, sort of. Like you can see right up there, it says XAVC S, and that's our higher bitrate mode, which will give us better quality footage and stuff like that. However, you need better micro SD cards to enable that and really get the full use out of it. So before, this used to be called Pro, now it says HD here, but then we have MP4. The big difference between these two really is this is a lower quality footage, but this will also allow us to do things more like higher frames per second. That's pretty much it. It allows us to shoot footage at higher frames of higher frame rate because we're basically not putting as much strain on the camera, the processor. So we'll go back to that. So again, we have a ton of options. We can turn steady on. What that's going to do is it's going to narrow our field of view and kind of help reduce some of the sort of general shaking. Now this model doesn't have Steady Shot 2.0, it has 1.0, so it's really good for handheld stuff, but not really good for micro vibrations. We have some audio options, wind reduction, color, vivid or natural. Natural is basically a more flat mode. If you plan on doing color correction yourself later, you might want to film like that. It's just got a whole bunch of options here, as you can see. One of the big ones that's a huge deal to me is angle, though. So now we can switch between 170 and 120 degrees. So what that means is we can go from wide to maybe a more medium or narrow field of view without turning Steady Shot on. Previously this option was not available, so that's great. But one of the things that bugs me is if let's say I did want to change this to 120 and then I wanted to go change my video resolution, as soon as I select that option, it kicks me back to sort of a random spot on the main menu. So now I have to go all the way back to Setup, and then I have to go to video format because now I want MP4 because I'm going to do a higher frame rate. And then I got to pick my resolution. So now I'm back in movie at the main menu. So I'm going to go back here, setup again, and it keeps kicking you back. I kind of wish when you made your choice here that it would just it would kick you back to here. And then when you're here, if I want to go back to the main menu, maybe I could just hold down the record button for 2 seconds, and then it'll just kick me back to that movie screen we were just at. So sort of minor complaint, but just things I'd like to see improved. Again, we have that lock screen here, that lock switch, so we don't accidentally start recording something if this is just in our backpack. We have the Wi-Fi that we can enable by pressing these 2 buttons. So one thing with the Wi-Fi is you're going to have a manual in this box, and it's going to have 2 stickers, and one of the stickers is going to look like this. Now each camera comes with its own unique password for its camera. So you take one of the stickers, you put that on the side, and you keep one in the manual. But basically, this is how you connect the Wi-Fi to the camera. And you won't have to put the code in more than once into your phone. Your phone will generally save that by default. And the same thing will go with the remote and stuff like that. So hopefully you won't have to enter this too many times. But again, keep the one in your manual or somewhere safe, because in case this gets rubbed off, you want to have access to that password in case you get new phones and stuff like that. So we'll take a look at the bottom here since we were talking about it before we get into the back here. On the bottom here we have sort of an external power, I believe. We have our HDMI out. I originally thought this was a microphone port, but it says power plug-in, so I'm assuming this is how maybe we can record and have power going to the camera, so maybe for live streaming or something like that, because this camera has the ability to do live streams through Ustream. On the back here, this is our USB port, so if we do have the tripod adapter here, we still have access to this USB port, which makes me believe this is how we're actually going to charge the camera while we're using it, and not that power plug. Close that up. Again, this is all splash proof. These are all nicely sealed and stuff like that. So we'll open this guy up, and this is our battery tray. We're going to be using the same batteries that we had last time. This is a third-party battery that I'm just using for right now. We'll show the battery in there, but it is an MPBX1, which is the same battery as the it's the same battery as the AS100, so you can be assured that like all of your past batteries are backwards compatible. And for some reason I can't get this battery to go back in here, but we don't really need it for... Oh, actually we do need that. There we go. So the arrow should be facing down. So we have our micro SD card here, and I'll just go over some things real quick because I get a lot of comments. So the one thing with the Sony cameras is technically you can throw any micro SD card in here that meets basic specs and use it. However, if you want to use some of the more advanced features like the higher bitrate mode, the XAVCS, you're going to need a card that meets its minimum requirements, that exceeds its minimum requirements. There's basically 2 sets of minimum requirements. So when you're buying an SD card, you want to make sure, pretty much ignore the whole Class 10, U1, and U3 thing, because the minimum specs for what those represent are just way below what you need for this. So I think U1 will mean it writes at 10 megabits a second, and U3 means it writes at 30 megabits a second, but we need something that writes at 60 megabits a second. So a U3 card writes at 30 megabits a second, that's way below what we need. Basically, these become buzzwords, and what you want to make sure is your micro SD card is a XC formatted card. You'll usually see that in the lower right here. If you see something that says, I think HC or HD, you don't want that. You want this XC. You also want to make sure your write speed is above 60 megabits. Now, most of the time, a card will display on the packaging, it writes at 95 megabits a second. However, that's usually its read speed, not its write speed. If you flip it over and look in the back, there's usually some yellow squares there that might tell you the speed, like on this guy right here. I don't know if you guys can see that. This actually, it says it reads at 95, but it actually writes at 90 megabits a second. So the reason why I chose this card is it's because it's the fastest card I can find on the market. I don't know if it's going to be the best card. We've been using it so far with no issues. We've been able to access the Pro mode and stuff like that. But I feel like with this card, you can actually get away with a cheaper card. You can maybe get the Lexar X633. I will put a bunch of recommendations in the more information section below this video. So check that out. We'll keep that updated. And if you have any recommendations, check out, just leave it in the comments. You know, the micro SD cards have always been slightly confusing. But if you want to get the most out of this camera, I definitely recommend getting an XC formatted card and make sure it writes above 60 megabits a second. So this camera offers a steady shot, which, you know, when we're moving and stuff like that, will kind of, again, make everything all nice and smooth. We do 1080p, 30 frames a second. We can also do 24 frames a second out of the box now, so it's one of the options in here, which is really nice for anyone who wants to use these in sort of a more cinematic approach. And then it's got the Zeiss lens, which has always been nice, but I do feel it's a little too wide. It's been kind of my complaint with the AS100. There's just a lot of lens distortion on how wide this is, but it's nice we have access to the more narrow field of view now right out of the gate. We also have the backlit image sensor, which provides us with like really nice low light footage. It's not really surprising that this camera continues to be really good at night. So anyway, let's see what else is here in this box real quick. So we'll take a quick look here at the sort of wristwatch attachment. So we have the wristwatch here. We'll take this off. And again, so if you want to use this camera and the GPS feature is really important for you, maybe you're like wanting to record the trails you hit up on a mountain or your speeds at a racetrack, you'll need this remote. And previously this used to say GPS somewhere on here, just so you would know, but I'm not seeing it out here, which slightly worries me. But this should be the newer model and stuff like that. You can open it up here on the side. Again, yellow means open. And then that's how you can charge it. I don't want to go through all this. So there's a bunch of menus and displays and stuff like that. So once you connect this can actually control up to 5 of these cameras at once and stuff like that. So let's say we had last year's AS100, which, as you can see, identical in size, shape, button layout. The only difference I noticed was the name of the camera on the AS100 is here on the left. On the AS200, it's on the top. That's really the only difference. Microphones. I didn't really talk about the stereo speaker. Sony's AS100 and AS200 and pretty much all of their cameras have phenomenal audio quality. These stereo mics on the front are what is to thank for all of that. So it's dude, it just has really great audio sounding. It really surprised me last year when we did our tests just how phenomenal they really were for such a cheap camera. If you're a sort of a musician or something like that, these cameras sound great. So we have these same paper manuals that we get every year, and I really wish Sony would maybe consider printing a booklet maybe as nice as this little advertisement here for their mounts and stuff like that, because this is the type of little booklet I want to keep in my bag, because this camera is really complicated. There's a lot of features. You know, we have steady shot, we have GPS, we have Wi-Fi. All of that information would be much easier to carry around if we had a nice little booklet. Instead we have these sort of like newspaper cutouts and stuff like that. Kind of stinks. I really don't like these, but it is what it is. You can always download a PDF manual and keep that on you, but if you're an iPhone user, PDFs are hard to use. Sony sticker quality gets better each year. They keep throwing in more and more of these, so you can represent your sort of Sony branding wherever you want. And then in this box we have a few more things. Nothing too surprising for probably most of you guys. We have our micro USB cable, so we can charge it, transfer footage. However, if you do get a card like this, maybe invest in a USB 3 sort of micro SD thing. If you get the Lexar X633, it actually comes with one and it makes transferring footage to your computer so much faster. Highly recommend that. Here we have our sort of quick release plate. So this is, whoops, almost knocked over the camera. We have our Sony quick release plate. Hit my funny bone and my hand is all numb now. So put this with the adapter here, and then we can slip it onto the adhesive mounts. Maybe we left one on multiple helmets and stuff like that. Oh, here's our adapter for this year. It's black, so we get to continue going with that whole two-tone look. Just open this up real quick. Cut through the tape there. Hand is still numb, so if we want to have a tripod mount, we put this on here. Yeah, I like that two-tone look, and then we have our tripod mount right in the center, which is great, because when we do press this back button, it's nice to have all of the weight in the middle and center and stuff like that, and when we are shaking, it's always good to have the attach point right in the middle, because it kind of reduces that as much as possible. I'll compare that to the white one we got from last year. I think this setup looks better. I really like the two-tone look. I like what they did with the case as well, you know, the whole two-tone look. I think it looks really nice. It's a really nice aesthetic change. It's minor, but it's what I like. We have a curved adhesive mount, so this one is preferable for helmets, and then we have a flat adhesive mount. So maybe if you're mounting this to the bottom of your skateboard or something, that's preferable, but be careful, because you can flip the lens in the menu settings, but this lens here is hard locked. But yeah, you don't want to scratch that on the ground and stuff like that. And here's our official battery, the, again, NP BX1. You can buy some third-party batteries. These ones generally last me a lot longer than the third-party ones. And power-wise, we actually were out filming for about 2.5 hours today, on and off, with this camera. It lasted the whole time, never had to switch out the battery, which is a big improvement from the X100, I'm sorry, the AS100. But yeah, the battery life has never been my favorite on the Sony series, but it does have an automatic turn-off mode pretty much a minute after using it, so it shouldn't be something that affects you too much. Now, I know most of you guys are interested in video footage, so we went out and recorded a bunch of this today, and let's switch over to that, and I'll just talk over some of the key points. But yeah, for the most part, it's a big improved version. There's basically a lot more options. Feature-wise, there's more options, so we'll have a lot of comparisons, and we'll get more into that later against the X1000. But yeah, let's jump over to the main footage.